Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to give you 5 reasons to read Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is an Own Voices Native American urban fantasy set in a post-apocalyptic landscape. It's about Maggie, who is a Dene monster hunter and the wielder of some pretty incredible clan powers. Basically, she's blessed with this ancient ability where in an instant she can see a million different ways to dispatch anyone who poses any kind of threat to her existence, and she becomes infinitely faster than her assailants. And in this post-apocalyptic America, ancient monsters from native creation myths have mysteriously returned to the land they once abandoned for reasons no one really knows. Maggie has been hired as a bounty hunter to investigate a missing girl who was stolen away by one of these monsters. But this time, tracking down her mark only leaves her with a lot of unanswered questions, and when she realizes what this monster truly is, she's led on a very dangerous quest. She also reluctantly partners up with an unconventional medicine man named Kai, and where she defaults to aggression and violence, he is much more reserved and passive. So the ways they approach monsters and trickster gods and mythical challenges definitely clash. As I always say, the fact that this is an amazing Own Voices Native American urban fantasy should really be a reason to read this book in and of itself. But reason number 1 is that I love how this author has interpreted and mapped out the meaning of the apocalypse. There's a bit of mystery surrounding how much of this world has been destroyed, but the old way of life has basically been undone by this event called Big Water, where many of the states and territories were suddenly and violently drowned out of existence. And I feel like the way this author explored the aftermath of that was very plausible and realistic, because of course the first place local and national governments would turn to in order to mine, aka steal, energy and resources would be from any surviving native nations. So there's an actual discussion about how those nations struggled against that and how they were forced to build walls to basically keep colonizers out, if only so they could in turn try to survive off these very scarce resources. And to me, the fact that native nations would outlive the forces trying to destroy them completely tracks. It was actually in some Native American studies courses where I was introduced to this idea that an apocalypse does not signal the end of the world, but the end to a way of life. And in that sense, Native and Indigenous peoples have been leading post-apocalyptic existences for generations. So to see these characters evolve to navigate this crude and dangerous landscape completely makes sense. Also, the world itself is just really well done. Very Mad Max-like with this endless desert landscape and souped-up vehicles and weapons, a complete restructure of authority and power on so many levels. I just really enjoyed it. Reason number 2, it's awesome to read about these legit as hell clan powers and these mythical monsters rooted in central native beliefs and stories. I love that native creation myths and stories are at the heart of everything happening in this book. We see it in the monsters and we see it in Maggie herself, which makes for a really interesting emotional dynamic because she often thinks of herself as evil and monstrous, and she's convinced that her existence actively endangers other folks. But I just love how this author uses that lore to create a unique and powerful magic system, especially because these stories are often discredited or dismissed in popular culture. It's rare to see them respected in the way they deserve. Like, to have these stories literally be the thing that gives these characters power and strength, I really don't have the words to describe how important that is. And I think Kai says it best when he talks about the stigma of clan powers being a curse when they're actually a gift and an instrument against dark times and the coming of monsters. These powers have the potential to both destroy and protect, depending on who's controlling the narrative and the choices they make. This convention of clan powers versus ancient monsters is very thoughtfully done and makes for some really strong emotional beats with a tremendous amount of payoff. Reason number 3 is that Maggie and Kai have a really compelling relationship dynamic. This, to me, is so delicious because I love when those rough around the edges, emotionally bereft hardasses bump up against these sincere, subtle, earnest characters who just throw them for a loop until they don't know what to do with themselves. Maggie is so emotionally complex because she was mentored by this powerful legendary Dene monster slayer known as Nezgahani, and they were also lovers before he abandoned her without so much as a look back. So she's very in her own head, she's reluctant to trust anyone or make any meaningful connections, and she kind of hates herself and deeply believes that she is not worthy of anyone's love, time, or trust. Kai is so different, and it's not that he's an open book, he's definitely closed off in his own way, but where Maggie is reliant on anger and violence, he is extremely collected and passive, and he refuses to fight where he can heal instead. And it's interesting to try and figure him out because you can definitely tell he's keeping his own secrets, and you're wondering what led him to becoming such a pacifist. Is he just a goody two-shoes, kiss-ass type? Did something happen in his past? Because there's definitely more going on beneath the surface, and he's not a character you can easily put in a box. So Maggie is constantly pushing Kai away when Kai is very earnestly 100% all in, and that's my favorite. I'm not gonna lie, you can tell some kind of romance is gonna happen between these characters very early on, but because of their character types, I was so about it. And I can't emphasize this enough, but especially because these characters are so emotionally complex and nuanced and rich, it's such good shit. Reason number 4 is that the story does a great job of exploring how modern native existence means grappling with an inherited cycle of betrayal rather than a sense of inherited suffering or sadness. Obviously, because of the horrible trauma, colonization, and genocide committed against Native peoples, there's a conception that the legacy Native folks have to contend with is one of inherent suffering or trauma. As if these people are doomed to be messed up or sad or destructive, and in some ways that's become a stereotype. This story, however, suggests that all of those things are a natural byproduct of betrayal itself, and what Native generations are left to inherit, so to speak, is a deep-seated sense of distrust, which makes sense. I would say that's the #1 thing Maggie is dealing with over the course of this book, and it's the root of her emotional issues and her aggressive, rash behaviors. She has been betrayed, hurt, and abandoned by Nehezkahani, which has subsequently broken and strengthened her in so many ways. It's the after effects of betrayal that are what's actually cycling through these characters' lives. That dictates how these new territories and unwritten laws have been formed. It dictates how Maggie is stopping herself from forging new connections. It dictates her deep-rooted sense of guardedness and wariness. And because she's been conditioned not to trust anyone but herself, that creates rifts in all of her relationships. That creates obstacles in her life. That's what's reflected back to her, and that is the cycle she's struggling to break. There's this sense that Maggie has to protect the little that hasn't already been forcibly taken from her, violently if necessary, and I think that speaks to what modern Native nations continue to face. And that leads into reason number 5. In many ways, this story is all about confronting the hard and endless work of decolonizing the mind itself. I think there's a conception that to decolonize is to get rid of, but as you see these characters confronting their trauma and their past in narratively exhilarating ways, I think you gain a better understanding that to decolonize is to undo the damaging effects of, to literally unmake the hurt that has been brought. And that is not easy work. Especially for Maggie, who again is just starting to emerge from this toxic relationship that dictates and warps her sense of self and every relationship she makes. I mean, there are moments where people say to her, "Who did this to you? Who made you believe this about yourself? Who came into your life and backed you into the furthest corner and left you there to rot?" And that's powerful because that acknowledges that all of these destructive patterns and emotional blocks started someplace. It's not just that bad things happen, but that those bad things lay down roots and make people believe that they're less. And when everything you have and everything you are has been so forcibly and violently minimized, how do you even begin undoing that? That is the question being posed in this book, and it's a difficult one to ask. Like I said, these characters confront undoing that damage throughout the story in so many extremely satisfying ways. There's no definitive end or answers to that process, but I think that's what makes it feel so compelling and authentic. So those are just 5 reasons to read this kick-ass book that will shred all of your emotions. I did forget to mention at the top of the video that this book comes with triggers for murder, brutality, and severe physical trauma, so do be conscious of that. As always, if you've read this one yourself, or if it just made its way onto your radar, I would love to discuss further in the comments. But that's everything I had for this review today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!